Writing. The train whistle echoed across the prairie as Clara Bennett pressed her trembling hands against the window. Endless fields stretched beneath the golden afternoon sun, and in the distance she could see the small frontier town that was supposed to become her new home. She had traveled nearly 1,000 miles with little more than a suitcase, a few dresses, and a bundle of letters from a man she had never met. For 6 months she had exchanged letters with Harold Whitaker, a rancher who lived in the Wyoming Territory. His words had been practical but kind. He wrote about the land, the horses, and the simple life he hoped to build with a good woman. Clara had believed every word. After losing both parents and spending years struggling to survive in a crowded city, she had longed for a place where she belonged. When the train finally stopped, passengers stepped onto the platform. Clara took a deep breath and followed them. Her heart raced as she searched the crowd for Harold. She saw farmers, merchants, women carrying baskets, and cowboys leaning against wooden posts. But she did not see Harold. She waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The platform slowly emptied until only a few people remained. A tall woman in a dark dress approached her. "Are you Clara Bennett?" "Yes." The woman looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, dear." Clara immediately felt something was wrong. "Where is Harold?" The woman hesitated. "He isn't coming." The words struck Clara like ice water. "What do you mean?" "He changed his mind." Clara stared at her. "That can't be true." The woman sighed. "He received your most recent photograph. He decided you weren't what he expected." For a moment Clara could not breathe. Everything around her seemed to blur. The woman offered an awkward nod before walking away. Within an hour the entire town knew. The mail-order bride had been rejected. Everywhere Clara went she felt eyes following her. Some people whispered. Others laughed quietly. A few simply shook their heads. The hotel owner demanded payment in advance. When Clara explained she was short on money, he refused to rent her a room. The boarding houses claimed they were full. By evening she found herself sitting alone on a bench near the train station, clutching her suitcase and wondering what she would do. She had enough money for only a few meals. Not enough for a return ticket. Not enough to start over somewhere else. The sky slowly darkened. A cold wind swept through the empty street. Clara fought back tears. She had never felt so alone. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the silence. A cowboy rode into town on a chestnut horse. He looked to be in his early 30s, with broad shoulders and weathered features shaped by years beneath the sun. As he passed the station, he noticed Clara sitting alone. He slowed his horse and studied her for a moment. "You planning to spend the night out here?" Clara looked away. "I don't have many options." The cowboy dismounted. "Mind if I sit?" She shrugged. He sat beside her without saying anything. For several moments they simply listened to the wind. Finally he spoke. "My name's Luke Dawson, Clara." "Nice to meet you, Clara." She laughed bitterly. "You might be the only one in town who thinks so." Luke understood immediately. "I heard about Harold." "Then you know everyone thinks I'm a fool." "I don't." She looked at him for the first time. Most people avoided her eyes. Luke didn't. There was no pity in his expression. No judgment. Only calm understanding. "Why not?" she asked quietly. "Because I don't think crossing half a country by yourself makes you a fool." Clara felt her throat tighten. Nobody had said anything kind to her all day. Luke studied her face. Then he looked directly into her eyes and said one simple word. "Stay." The word surprised her. "Stay." He nodded. "Don't let one man's mistake decide your future." She stared at him. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not. Then why help me?" Luke smiled slightly. "Because sometimes people deserve a second chance before they've even had a first one." Something inside Clara softened. For the first time since arriving, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Luke offered her a place to stay at his ranch until she figured out what to do. After a long hesitation, she accepted. The next morning they rode out together. Luke's ranch wasn't nearly as grand as Harold's had sounded in his letters. The fences needed repair. The barn leaned slightly. Several gates hung crookedly, yet it felt warm and alive. An elderly housekeeper named Martha welcomed Clara with open arms. "You look hungry," Martha said immediately. Clara nearly cried when she smelled fresh bread baking in the kitchen. For the next several weeks Clara helped wherever she could. She cooked meals, mended clothing, organized supplies. She even learned how to care for horses. Luke never treated her like a burden. He never asked for payment. And he never mentioned Harold. The townspeople, however, had not changed. Whenever Clara visited the general store, conversation stopped. People whispered behind her back. One afternoon she overheard two women speaking. If Harold didn't want her, there must be a reason. Clara hurried outside before they could see the tears in her eyes. Luke found her sitting beside the horse trough. What happened? Nothing. That's not true. She looked away. They'll never accept me. Luke sat beside her. You're giving strangers too much power. It doesn't feel that way. It takes time. Clara shook her head. Why are you always so patient? Luke laughed softly. Because life taught me to be. He explained that years earlier he had lost both his parents within months of each other. Many people had expected him to fail. Some had even predicted he would lose the ranch. But they were wrong, Clara said. Because I kept going. His eyes met hers. So should you. As summer passed, Clara and Luke grew closer. They worked side by side every day. Sometimes they spent evenings talking on the porch while the sun disappeared behind the hills. Luke told stories about growing up on the frontier. Clara shared memories of her childhood. For the first time in years, she laughed freely. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Then one afternoon disaster struck. Dark storm clouds rolled across the sky. The wind howled through the valley. Luke and several ranch hands rode out to bring cattle back before the storm hit. Hours passed. Rain poured from the heavens. Lightning flashed repeatedly. Clara paced nervously inside the house. Then a ranch hand burst through the door. Luke's hurt. Her heart nearly stopped. What happened? His horse slipped near the river. Without hesitation Clara grabbed supplies and followed the men. The storm raged around them. Mud soaked her dress. Rain blinded her eyes. When they finally found Luke, he was lying on the ground beside his injured horse. His leg was badly hurt. His forehead was bleeding. Clara immediately took charge. She organized the men, helped transport Luke home, cleaned his wounds, stayed awake throughout the night. For days she barely left his side. Martha repeatedly urged her to rest. But Clara refused. Whenever Luke woke, she was there. Whenever he needed water, she brought it. Whenever pain overwhelmed him, she comforted him. One evening Luke opened his eyes and found her asleep in a chair beside his bed. He watched her quietly. When Clara finally woke, she looked embarrassed. You should be resting, she said. Luke smiled. So should you. She shook her head. You scared me. The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a moment neither spoke. Then Luke reached for her hand. His voice was barely above a whisper. You stayed. Clara smiled softly. Yes. I don't know what I'd have done without you. Her heart raced. Neither of them looked away. From that moment everything changed. As Luke recovered, people throughout town heard about Clara's devotion. They learned how she had cared for him during the storm. How she had worked alongside the ranch hands. How she had helped save livestock and protect the ranch. Gradually the whispers faded. People began greeting her on the street. Shopkeepers smiled when she entered. The same town that once rejected her slowly began accepting her. But the opinion that mattered most belonged to Luke. One evening in early autumn they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air was cool. The world felt peaceful. Luke seemed unusually nervous. Finally he stood and reached into his pocket. Clara's heart skipped. He held a small ring. Clara, he began. She stared at him silently. When I first met you at the station, I thought I was helping someone who needed a place to stay. He smiled. Turns out you were helping me. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Luke stepped closer. You brought life back into this house. His voice trembled. You brought joy back into my days. A tear rolled down Clara's cheek. Luke gently took her hand. I don't care what Harold thought. Neither do I, she whispered. I only care about what I know. And what's that? Luke smiled. That you're the strongest, kindest woman I've ever met. Clara could barely breathe. Luke slipped to one knee. I love you. The words hung in the cool evening air. I loved you long before I understood it. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Will you marry me? For a moment she remembered the lonely girl who had stepped off that train months earlier. The girl nobody wanted. The girl everyone rejected. Then she looked at Luke. The man who had seen her worth when nobody else could. The man who had looked into her eyes and spoken a single word that changed everything. Stay. Yes, she whispered. Luke laughed with relief. Yes, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her into his arms. The sun disappeared beyond the horizon as they stood together beneath the fading light. Months later the entire town attended their wedding. Even those who had once judged her. Even those who had whispered. Because now everyone understood something they had missed before. The value of a person cannot be measured by appearances, rumors, or first impressions. Sometimes the greatest treasures arrive in unexpected ways. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to look beyond rejection and see the heart underneath. For Clara Bennett, that person was a cowboy named Luke Dawson. And the word he spoke on the darkest day of her life became the beginning of her greatest happiness. Stay. If you'd like, I can also provide Scene 1 and Scene 2 cinematic image prompts for this story.